Alright, response video to Professor Anton, sort of. Thou art that there, having a conversation back and forth about the non-God God, the idea of the intelligence of the universe that doesn't really feel or think, but it's innately Gaia-ish and related somehow to us consciously, and blah 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 blah. And it's just such a crock of crap. I mean, really, people just can't. Apparently, they just got to find some way to make the game more than it is. More than this evolution thing, which they don't want to look at realistically. So that's the substance of this. I guess it's going to be a conversation about what evolution is. There are some aspects of evolution that are just plain ugly. Plainly.
Forces, and then say the word fluke, or claim that life could have not emerged. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, so people aren't claiming that the life wouldn't have emerged if you had the same circumstances. The argument being made is that life is the product of a very perfect storm, a lot of very improbable events. It isn't a function of the universe. It isn't something the universe just does. Right? It's something the universe only does when there's this chemical reaction that creates this mechanism that allows evolution to take place, and at a rate sufficiently rapid enough to gain some sort of complexity in enough time before you get hit by an asteroid or some other calamity happens to the planet. And that's the reality of the universe. Most of the universe doesn't give you enough time to even do any evolution. So there's so many impediments against it. And the fact that we don't see it anywhere else. We don't see any other animated mechanisms on Earth. They don't exist. I mean, stalagmites, stalactites, okay, that's like the closest thing to a living thing. Some crystals growing, quote unquote. There's nothing even close. There's no parallel abiogenesis. There's no parallel single nucleus cells. There's no parallel eyeballs, neurons. Where's the other correlate to a neuron? Where did neurons happen twice in evolution? Where did a thinking machine happen in a second way? It didn't. And that's going to mean something as a fact. Okay, as an idea that this isn't the machinery. This isn't what the machine makes as human beings. This isn't what it does. The universe does. It just does stuff because it can do stuff because it is. And the fact that it is isn't a magical reason. The reason, if we ever do get some inkling of the mechanism that creates the photon, it's not going to be a magical story. It's not going to be innately intelligent. It's not going to be any of that stuff. It's just going to be a mechanical thing. It's going to be a cause and an effect. And it's not going to be terribly interesting. I promise you.
Had to have emerged from that position. And again, it had to have emerged, but just with no purpose, no consequence. It's just doing whatever it's doing, but it's really nothing. Machine and mechanistic metaphors are the dumbest thing ever. When people...
Yeah, well, so that's sort of a shot at me, I think. Because I just made a video with the word machine in it as a response to one of his videos, so it sort of fits, I suppose. But anyway, regardless whether it is or isn't a direct statement by him, who knows? Everybody's a veiled pussy, and they can't just directly make an argument to somebody. But anyway, of course it's a mechanism. Every bit of us is a mechanism. And we can see that what we're built out of is just different kinds of mechanisms. And we call, this is again with language. This language is so broken. We call a bacterium and we call a human being, we classify them as living things. And they're living things in entirely different ways. We only have aliveness through colonization. It's like the difference between the living bee and then the beehive actually being an organism that moved around and that had ideas and had thoughts. So if you saw a beehive and beehives actually moved around and they could communicate and they went meow, you would have this dilemma of what is alive, the bees or is the colony alive? So again, we're calling these things the same thing, and they're not really the same thing. Our cells are alive like bacteria are alive, like those things are living things because they reproduce. But what we do as a colony organism, as something made up of living things, is completely different. It's the same, but you can see the mechanism, you can see the mechanicalness of it, in the sense that don't we duplicate exactly what they do? Consume and reproduce? It's exactly the same function, but it's an entirely different structure. It's it's made out of something entirely different. They're made out of raw chemistry, raw gook, okay, and we're made out of them. Cells are made out of the plasma of life. We're made out of cells. Our consciousness is being created in an atmosphere, okay, of cellular arrangements, neurons, not just the goo.
We'll try to talk about the cosmos. Machine just doesn't work.
Yeah, so again, it doesn't work. Why? Because you don't like it. But it's a mechanism, and we can see the mechanisms. If we break down the system, we can see the little chemistry. You know, we've sort of detailed some of this chemistry, and we figure out that these little microtubules pull the chromosome apart, and then we figure out that, you know, this is the way that the DNA molecule is split in half by a little chemical machine. They're little chemical machines, and those machines got bigger and bigger. Okay, they just grew in terms of complexity because they kept interacting with the world over billions of years, and new things stuck to them, new identities stuck to them through those interactions. And we can see the development of that. We can see that it was built on this kernel, that it started off with a kernel, the DNA molecule, and then it grew, the kernel grew in a very mechanistic way into a bigger thing that was doing basically the same thing, but just doing it in a much more complex way.
First, the machines are created with purposes in view.
Says you. I mean, the word machine just has to do with the idea that something is a function, that it's a mechanism, okay, a collection of parts, you know, that perform a function. That, to me, would be the definition of a machine. Or if you're going to sit there and say machines are always something created by somebody, well then, okay, that's a different definition of mechanism. I'm saying that if a tree falls over another tree and it creates a fulcrum, a teeter-totter, okay, it's created a machine, it's created a mechanism, something that can bob up and down in the water. It can do a lot of different things. It would be mechanical in structure. So it would deserve mechanical, it would deserve the word machine. But yeah, if you're going to, again, if it's a vocabulary problem, okay, yes, if you're saying machine can only be something created by something with intent, well then yeah, okay, we have to come up with some other word for devices in nature, devices, like a cloud producing snow. You don't think it's a machine, essentially? You don't think the weather is effectively a machine? A mechanism that produces weather?
So the universe was not a machine. People, the life, the organic that emerges out of the intelligent orderliness.
Well, again, this organic word. Organic on what level? Okay, I mean, they're organic on the level of the DNA molecule, which is evolving or swimming in a sea of goo, plasma, that is doing the real evolving, all right, and it is causing through interactions and exchanges to be developed or grow these duplicate models, okay, but that's through a whole nother mechanism. But I mean, it's just swimming in its little sea, and then the cell that's holding that molecule, the sperm or the egg, it's swimming in its sea of survival, of what it needs to survive, of doing what's required to survive. And it's obviously doing more, because now it's taking care of the DNA molecule. It's providing for the molecule, because the molecule has no arms and legs or anything else. It just has structure. It just has built into it a certain phenomenological structure. It splits in half and creates two copies, two identical copies, hopefully identical. Intended, no, regularly identical. That's its simple function. It can't go out and buy a watermelon for lunch. You know, it can't do any of that. It has to rely on the mechanism. So now the mechanism is protecting it, because it is creating its mechanism, and everything's dependent on this molecule. So, but the molecule is the most unliving thing in the chain. Isn't that, you know, sort of the irony is that the kernel of life is the deadest thing, right? The first living thing, the smallest bit that you can reduce life down to go all the way backward to the first, when you can first say it's alive. That thing is the deadest of the living things.
Yes, that is not a machine either. Machines do not heal their own wounds.
Well, says you again. These are just his rules of machineness. But clearly, yes, machines can have all kinds of different levels to their functionality, and to sit there and say that you know, say not even a microorganism, but let's go to some of the cruder insects, very tiny brains, the cephalopods or whatever, blah blah blah, the insect larvae even, you know, living in a stream, and it has, you know, very complex behavior, you know, in the sense that it'll attach rocks to itself to create a disguise, to camouflage, to live in. So it's certainly protecting itself, it certainly would heal itself, it would certainly do all of those things, but no one would look at it and say, gee, that's such an expression of our aliveness, right? It looks like it's, no, the programming's pretty consistent, pretty stagnant, pretty dead. There's not very much to it. It probably doesn't have much of a theater of consciousness going on.
They do not grow. They do not need nutrients. They do not metabolize and exchange gases with.
Well, again, you're saying so. We could certainly build a machine that could do that. We could make a machine that had to be self-sufficient. So we could make a machine, a solar robot or something, and we could have it clean off its own solar panel, and we could have it maintain its own wires, and we could have it do all of that. But it doesn't, obviously most machines don't need to do that because they don't need to exist. And they're completely replaceable. So why would the toaster need to repair itself? Yes, we could make a $500,000 toaster that could repair itself. But who wants a $500,000 toaster? You know, when you can throw out a $5 toaster when it's broken. Yeah. So don't blame machines because they don't have any of these attributes you want them to have, or you're expecting them to have. The reason why they don't have those attributes is because it's to our convenience, not because they can't have them. It's that we won't give them to it because it's too expensive to give toasters a personality.
Their environments, they do not have semi-permeable boundaries that they use to make micro exchanges with, you know, pheromones.
Yeah, well, they, like I said again, that is totally could be. We could create a machine that builds a building. Let's say we almost have that now. We almost have machines that build buildings, and we could have them, you know, go to lunch with each other. We could give them waste programming. We could give them waste function, but it would be understood to be waste function because it wouldn't have anything to do with them serving our purpose. And it would have, and if we gave them their own purpose, that would mean we'd have to give them their own agenda, their own desire mechanism, their own something needing satisfaction. Yeah, and so then you're just creating another waste organism, another need that doesn't need to exist. Let's satisfy some more needs that don't need to exist. Let's have the building machine. The machine that builds buildings needs to go to lunch. And he needs to seduce himself some tail, you know. Yeah, he's got to go get him some. Would that occur to somebody to be a smart idea? Or would that be just absolutely idiotic? And that's what we are. Absolutely idiotic. We're not even building buildings for something. Our creator doesn't even exist to say, hey, you know, you're supposed to be making buildings, not going to lunch chasing pussy. Yeah, he doesn't even show up to say that because he doesn't exist. And it's quite obvious where we came from. We came from a sticky, goopy soup of crap that just consumes and reproduces and cannibalizes because it's fucking addicted. And that's it. Grow.
Environment. They don't need a space and a territory in which to rove.
Again, that's just because we didn't give him the need. So again, you're going to keep arguing it as if the machines lack consciousness, the illusion of consciousness, and the illusion of sensitivity, you know, real sensitivity, like where they could say ouch. And they don't lack that thing because of any other reason than nature fell upon it through billions of years of evolution, and we still haven't dissected how exactly you create this illusion, this internal programming where this mechanism fucks with itself. You know, it definitely has the snake eating the tail kind of circularity and a feedback mechanism that just feed back too much. But it is all just an illusion. It's an illusion created by neurons in a multicellular colony of living things. But it's an illusion. It's not real what's happening. I mean, it's not real in the sense that it's real as a phenomenon, but it's not. It doesn't have any. It has a structural correlation to arrangement. There's definitely a way that it's formed through shape. It's almost like a missile, you know, a rocket having to be pointy to get through the atmosphere efficiently. Yeah, it has to obey certain rules for this thing to be created, but that's all it's doing. It's a mechanical thing that's happening. And we know that our freaking psychology and our thoughts and our ideas and our formation of language and understanding and even vocabulary, all of these things happen in a very mechanical way. You do not derive this understanding by mystical function. You do it the same way a machine acquires a function. Somebody has to screw the tool on. Somebody has to program the device to do it. It doesn't just know it innately. It has to be built into it. And we can see how our personality is built into us. We can see how our knowledge is built into us, how it's hammered into us.
The number of comparisons by which machines are just not organisms and organisms are not machines, it could be made endlessly, and only people who are inattentive to language and its metaphorical power could just be blind to that.
Yeah, whatever. Metaphorical power of words. Wow, gee, that's saying so much. I mean, what does that mean? Oh, you mean the lying nature of vocabulary? I mean, that's all you just said, really, right? The not explicit, not accurate, game playing, fantasy nature of fucking with words in certain ways to imply that something is something it's not really. Yeah, we can do that with language, or we can say the red ball is round. We can say something explicit and true, or we can say something to imply something else. To say that we're not machines is to imply we're something other than, something constructed by cause and effect, okay, by the nature of the circumstance. The circumstance dictates it, just like the circumstance dictates the move and travel around the earth. There's a certain physical rules that will inevitably require anything that's going to do this evolution thing to get into this physical contest with the other evolving things, and that whoever has the best toolkit wins is going to be the end game, and whoever circumstantially has the right tools at the right time. You know, you just happen to have an asteroid umbrella you know, when the asteroid shows up. You know, you buy the market, you know, you sell in the market, let's say, the day before the crash. So you just get kind of lucky. Or whatever. I mean, but the circumstance is only going to, the rewards that are built into the circumstance, the fact that the system is going to reward a certain kind of functionality or a certain kind of mechanical function is deducible and understandable. We can see why we are shaped the way we are shaped. We can see why we behave the way we behave. It can be understood, just like a mechanism. We can read the blueprint and we can see why it does what it does.
The point would be that there is an intelligent orderliness, and it
Okay, so this is going to be the tricky word, right? If intelligence is going to be a ball rolls down a hill, or a snowball, or an avalanche cascades down a mountain in a certain orderly way, like the snow in the back doesn't jump to the front, and it actually does, but it tends to, even an avalanche, the snow is tending to roll, which is, but you don't see the rolling. But anyway, I don't want to get a but that orderliness, to call that intelligent, to say that the way snow cascades down a mountain is intrinsically intelligent, or to say that it has form and narrow structure, that it's a filtered product, that it obeys rules, yes. But don't you have to be a little careful to call that, use the same word, intelligent, to describe Einstein and cascading snow down a mountain? To describe the the idea of understanding mechanism and being mechanism? Aren't we back to the same argument that it's just as wrong as to call a microbe and a human being alive? Because they're alive in fundamentally a different way. They're fundamentally swimming in a different atmosphere. They're functioning in a different frame of the universe, made out of entirely different substantive arrangement, dependent on completely different kind of forces. We're dependent on the forces that cohere cells to each other, that bond and feed them with capillaries and veins and arteries. We're dependent on a structure entirely different than the structure they're dependent on. And certainly because of neurons, and only because of neurons, we're having this conversation. A physical box of neurons, a physical, distinct kind of organism. Probably the wrong word to use. I mean, your whole neural colony is essentially an organism, right? From the brain and all its neural connections, if you pulled it out, you can almost say, if you could keep it alive outside of your body, it's an organism. Yeah, pretty much. But regardless, just using a different word, but I'm just saying that that's the distinction. We are that thing. We are that organ. We're not even this body. We're just that neurons. Neurons are us. That's everything. Our perception, our senses, our knowledge, our intelligence. It's made out of neurons. It's made out of one specific kind of specifically formed living thing. Enslaved. Living things enslaved into a colony to create a kind of function. To keep another colony alive. I mean, the brain is essentially, the neurons are essentially enslaved by, you could argue, the rest of the organs of the body. And those organs are, in effect, enslaved by the other collective of competing organs. Yeah. Slavery everywhere. Slavery all the way down. So anyway, but that gets back to the whole parasitic argument and the whole reality of this is what evolution is. You can say it's not a mechanism, but when a leech is sucking its blood, it's a mechanism. When an assassin bug is feeding, it's a mechanism. When a praying mantis is eating its prey, it's a mechanism. These are mechanisms. When a microbe is digging its way through a cellular wall, it's a mechanism. They're mechanisms. They're machines. And they're appropriately called that. And we're also a machine. We're just living in a different environment than they're living in. And we're made out of billions of enslaved cells, microbes, microorganisms. Okay, enough. So till next time.